think this video is a response to GOAT, you know, it's connected to a lot of videos, not only the conversation between Astronaut and Veritas, but the one between the modern mystic Nick and Matt regarding purpose of life, even, because to me they're sort of connected. I mean, you can't talk about morality and virtue without getting into the whole ought question and the question of, yeah, what's a good life? What's the definition of, I mean, it's sort of even somebody who we would call a bad person would have a perception of purpose and a perception of that life being of value of some kind, whether they've exaggerated their own self-worth or not. It's still a perception of virtue in their own head, even if they're a taker. I think the first thing that's missing from the conversation is a distinction between the different kinds of morality. I see a clear distinction. I don't even think you can. I think the two really have to be separated. So first there's this thing we call the social contract. There's a morality we contrive for no other purpose than to make it possible for us to live in a civilized circumstance. There may not be any absolute morality saying it is wrong to kill, but there certainly is a necessary morality for the sake of society, that we must respect each other's lives. And so to me there's a whole portion of morality that has nothing to do with objectivity beyond the fact that we concede to it. And so I would say everything that falls into the do unto others as you would have others do unto you kind of idea of morality is part of that social contract morality. It's a kind of a necessary premise for our own survival. We're not going to survive if we don't follow certain rules. And so I think even Jefferson's statement of, you know, one man's liberty should end where another man's begins is another way of saying a similar thing. And it's a social contract. It's a way of accepting that we have to, that we're not allowed to take our personal calculations of right and wrong and apply them to other people, because obviously we could draw the conclusion, I could draw the conclusion that it might be worth assassinating someone to prevent a greater harm to society. But obviously if everybody is allowed to make that determination, then there's no survival. It's sort of the argument I've used before about the gun nuts and their refusal to accept that everybody cannot have the right to define when it's time to revolt. If we give everybody that right, then we are going to be besieged by Timothy McVeighs in the future who keep wanting to start the revolution. So anyway, so that out of the way, and when I put a whole class of you know, the law and order kind of morality as really, I mean, it can make for interesting discussion, but I don't think it can be part of a discussion about absolute morality. Because absolute morality, I think, comes from see, I would disagree with Veritas on this one, because I don't, the morality isn't something innate in human beings. It's a science, it's a philosophy, it's constructed out of logic. If there is such a thing as a absolute morality, that's how it's going to be found. And I'd compare it to like physics. So let's say physics, you know, Einstein comes up with the E equals mc squared. That's an equation. And but to test that equation, you have to be literate in the science to test it. Otherwise, you just have to accept Einstein's word for it, because you don't have the knowledge base or the capacity to do the test. So philosophically, there's got to be, you have to have a certain level of understanding to be able to even start taking this next step. So Nick would say we have to be very skeptical of any science that goes into this area. Maybe more skeptical than we are about the physical sciences. So the test has to be, rigorous. And it's very hard to have a test for concepts that aren't going to be tangible. They're going to be logical concepts. It's going to be a logical construction. I say it's just as real as E equals mc squared. It's just as real as a model of reality. And that's what we're attempting to do with philosophy, is model reality. Okay, so there's the purpose of morality, in my opinion. Morality is just another word, or ethics, for productivity. It's another word for producing more than you consume. It's another way to measure efficiency. So the equation is basically a conversion. It's attempting to convert your potential as a human being, the potential of your capacity to interact with the world, and a measurement of how much good or productive production that you can manifest through that interaction. And so there would obviously be an optimum efficiency, of 100%. And there'd be some scale of missed opportunities in between that. There'd be an optimum moment of perhaps, of doing everything exactly to optimize your impact. There would be probably a perfect way to live. Obviously, because of the subtlety of our interactions with the world, we have very little potential to understand that absolutely perfect way to live your life. You just can't know all the variables, so there's just no way for you to ever be able to ascertain that. And so, as I've sort of pointed out, the best we can do is come up with something kind of like quantum theory, where we come up with something that can establish probabilities. So at least we'll know, we can ascertain what is likely to be productive behavior. And sometimes that investment will not pay off, but most of the time it will. And that's probably the best we can achieve, is to try to do the right thing for the right reasons most of the time. The outcome might not be what we intend every single time, but over the course of time, the probability would be that we would be more productive than destructive. So, if I was to create the rudiments of an equation, I would say the equation has to have in it, the components of the equation are going to be this conscious manifestation, this thing we know of as an unpleasant feeling.
Pain, suffering, harm, these are all words to describe some portion of that, some part of that, some degree of the consequence of this deprivation of consciousness, where consciousness is in a state of need. Need is sort of the ultimate negative. It is the first negative. It is the real particle, the calorie, the substance of morality is need. It's what we're born with, it's what motivates us, it's what creates all purposes based on, somehow or other, this capacity for our consciousness to manifest this thing we call need. And it's I don't personally yet at this point have any equation that can tell you exactly what need or what deprivation is worth what. I'm saying that if we just accept that notion, that need is the calorie, need is the fundamental quantum that we're measuring, that we're using. It's the euro, it's the dollar, it's the currency of the equation. We can obviously say that, we can obviously make comparisons, we can put things on a scale and say, yes, deprivation of this need is going to be worth more than twice that amount of need. So if you can eliminate twice as much need as the need you are imposing, then you obviously did something productive, because you eliminated twice as much negative and only paid one negative to do it. And I would speculate that that really is the only thing of value. That happiness is really just an illusion. That is the absence of need. That is the absence of deprivation. That is the absence of dissatisfaction. Whatever, we have lots of terms for those feelings, and that it really doesn't have a positive quality, and that the real positive quality is in eliminating the negative. That's really the foundation of an objective morality that I think we have the logical tools to construct.